Thomas Paine. You probably heard the name, right? Maybe mentioned in a history class somewhere? They often call him the father of the American Revolution. But, well, the story of how America treated its so-called father is, let's just say it's complicated. So let's dive into this pretty remarkable and honestly kind of tragic story.
And this is the real head-scratcher, isn't it? The central paradox of his entire life. Here's a guy who is a full-blown hero, celebrated on 2 different continents, and yet his story ends with him being forgotten and pretty much despised. How on earth does that happen? That's exactly what we're going to unpack. And make no mistake, people absolutely revered him. This quote here, it's from a letter written on behalf of President George Washington himself. It just shows you the level of respect he commanded. He wasn't just some political writer. He was seen as a global friend of human rights. Seriously, try to remember this high point, because the fall from grace is, well, it's staggering.
Okay, so to really understand that fall, we have to appreciate the incredible heights he reached first. And it all kicked off with the sheer power of his words during the American Revolution.
You know, it's actually hard to overstate the impact of this. Before Paine came along, the idea of independence was this radical thing that only a few people were whispering about. But after he published his pamphlet, Common Sense, it became the rallying cry for a whole nation. He just used this simple, powerful language that everybody could get, and the idea just spread like wildfire.
And this really says it all. Years later, when they finally put up a monument for him, they didn't list all his fancy titles or the battles he was part of. Nope. They just chose the 3 words that completely defined him and literally changed the world. Author of Common Sense.
But Paine's vision wasn't just stuck on America. Not at all. He saw the fight for liberty as a global thing, and his genius was celebrated all over the place.
Okay, what's really wild here is the sheer range this guy had. I mean, he was a scientist, an inventor, and a political rock star all rolled into one. He was honored by America's top intellectual groups, he designed this totally groundbreaking iron bridge, and then, when he went to France, they greeted him with cheers of Vive Thomas Paine and made him a deputy in their new government. For a while there, he was literally on top of the world.
But his time in France, it started with all this promise, but it took a seriously dark turn. It led him straight into the shadow of the guillotine during the infamous Reign of Terror.
Yeah, the political situation in France just flipped on a dime. Paine got arrested, thrown in prison, and his name was put on the list for execution. Can you imagine? Every single night, he and the other prisoners would just listen for the sound of the guards' footsteps, knowing that any night could be their last. The system they had was just brutally simple. A guard would walk down the halls with the list, and he'd mark the doors of the people scheduled to be executed the next morning. A simple chalk mark on your door. And that was it. It was a death sentence.
And this is one of those moments where history just pivots on something tiny. On the very night Paine was supposed to be marked for death, his cell door just happened to be wide open, pressed flat against the hallway wall. The guard, probably in a hurry, just marked the side of the door that was facing him, which happened to be the inside of the door.
So later that night, someone closed the door, and that deadly chalk mark was now hidden inside the cell. When the executioners came in the morning, they looked at the outside of Paine's door, saw no mark, and just walked on by. He was saved by the way a door was hanging. Just pure, random chance. Unbelievable.
So, what does a man do after he stares death right in the face and survives by a complete fluke? Well, if you're Thomas Paine, you write and publish the most controversial book of your life, the very thing that would lead to your social, if not literal, execution.
He'd actually been working on it while he was in prison, and after he got out, he finished it. Now, the Age of Reason, it wasn't an attack on God. Paine absolutely believed in a creator, but it was a blistering, no-holds-barred assault on organized religion and taking the Bible literally.
This slide really gets to the core of it all. On one side, you have Paine, championing reason, science, and just looking at the world around you. He wanted things to be knowable, practical, and humane. On the other side was what he called dogma, the mysterious, the speculative stuff that relied on blind faith. He was drawing a line in the sand. And he wasn't being vague about it either. He went through the Bible page by page, pointing out what he saw as clear contradictions, like why there are 2 totally different reasons given for the Sabbath. He questioned prophecies, the creation story, all of it. He even said that as a kid, he thought the story of God sacrificing his son made God seem like a passionate man, not a being that was supposed to be all good and all powerful. This was a direct shot at the very foundation of Christianity at the time.
The backlash was, as you can probably guess, immediate and fierce.
First, the establishment tried to just laugh it off, treat the book like it was nonsense. But that just made people more curious. The more they trashed it, the more copies it sold. So when making fun of it didn't work, they moved on to Plan B, prosecution.
Paine had survived a French prison and the guillotine, but he wouldn't survive this. The fallout from the Age of Reason followed him all the way back to America and basically defined the rest of his life.
When he came back to the U.S. in 1802, you'd think he'd get a hero's welcome, right? Far from it. Instead, he was branded an infidel, an atheist. His old friends wanted nothing to do with him. The newspapers just tore him to shreds. He spent his last years sick and poor and eventually died in a small house in New York City. And the final insult? It came at his funeral. The man whose words helped create a nation was buried with only 6 people there to mourn him. 6! Can you believe that? From a hero celebrated by millions to a funeral attended by just 6 people?
So we kind of end up right back where we started. Thomas Paine was, without a doubt, a patriot. He championed reason, liberty, and the rights of everyday people. But he was also branded a heretic because he dared to apply that same reason to the religious beliefs of his time. And it leaves us with this really challenging question. Can someone be both? Can you be a founding father and a radical outcast at the same time? And what does it say about us when we celebrate someone for challenging political power, but we condemn them for challenging religious power? His life kind of forces us to ask those uncomfortable questions.